Hello guys, LukeJ speaking. Welcome to Book Reviews, episode number 46. Today we read you chapter 8 of the book called Henson Biography. So let's read it out, shall we? So we got for us. We're now on chapter 8, The Mucking Fuppets, like that. From 1973 to 1975. Here's Jim's Land Gorge cast from the first season of Saturday Night Live, left to right. King Foley's Wise, the My Frog, something like that. Fred, Quagga, Farm, and Socks, something like that. SNL's human cast members hate giving up on screen time for the Gorge sketches, almost as much as SNL writers' large writing team. Full grade 8.1. Now, as I'm currently exploring the project, so I'm going to do this anyway. The time is right, the variety show hosted by dogs, frogs, and monsters, wrote Jim in his first official pitch for the Muppet Face television, next page, anyways, show in the late 1960s. After nearly a decade of appearances on other people's variety shows, Jim was raised the Muppets good more than older for 30 minutes each week, and in the summer of 1969, he had prepared for a first formal proposal, packaged under an layered full color cover page, announcing the Muppet Show, considered a half-hour primetime big-budget show starring the Muppets. Okay, even in its early stages, Jim knew precisely the audience he wanted from the Muppet Show. Show's aimed for adult or young adult audience, okay? But it's a show for the full family. He wrote, the humor is anyway, will be adult, but children always enjoy the puppets, like that. And the show will present nothing but bad taste to offend kids. He also concerned about the format. The show would be as a loose MSAs of bits and pieces, wrote Jim. Something like that. Incorporating a guest star each week who does musical numbers with and without the Muppets. Calling bits with some of the puppet characters, etc., etc. While Jim was proposing Danny Kaye as the first guest. He was also willing to forego the idea of a guest star altogether, offering to host the show himself. The low-key performer Greg Uri Kovacs. Okay? Jim's first draft was heavily influenced by the variety shows of the time, which relied on the set pieces and variety recurring characters. In the same vein of Laughing's Joking Wall or Here Comes the Judge skits, Jim then proposed a number of regular segments, which he hoped helpfully illustrate with full-color cartoons, including Kermit as a late-night talk show host named Jackie Cobson, something like that. Reciting over panel discussion like that, they were up into fist fights. It's a skit featuring a princely critic at large named Ahmet Fridge, something like that, who reviewed books and films with body titles like Ugly Next Door, which I'll talk about during book reviews another time. Okay, some of these bits explain Jim somewhat clumsy, have a very point next page. Anyways, a few, but they often exist only for the sake of pure comedy and entertainment. Jim would tinker something like that with this proposal, but only in the next few years. Describing for shows built around guest stars like Paul McCartney or Sam Spielberg. Driving detailed budget spreadsheets like that. Jim thought episodes would cost roughly $32,350. Wow. To produce. Another far below was the $125,000 he would eventually spend on each installment of The Muppet Show. Now, an adorable length of why the Muppets were uniquely suited for the show of their own. Puppets are fortunate, and they could do and say things like why a performer wouldn't touch into the stick. Jim explained, Okay? Later he would exploitatively, though not necessarily helpfully, gush the Muppets with more than any other puppets are more real fame than the real fame. And moderately, Jim's earlier Muppet Show proposals were more impassioned than polished. Once Jim opened his black boxes and began performing his way through Muppet skits, and he's only describing on paper or something like that. His vision was clear. He's a television and fetishes and fetishes like that. So anyway. And it's already 1973 in April meeting with Jim. He had been impossible for Michael Eisner to say no. Wow. With Eisner's approval of ABC, approval from that, ABC was back with the pilot for a weekly Muppet series. Now that he had ABC's support, Jim has sat down in July to discuss ideas with Jerry Joel, television writer Jerry Ross, and former Jimmy Dean scribe Will Glakeman. Now, Jim has been mindset on the Muppet Valentine's Day show. Yeah, another one of those holiday-themed specials he had begun pitching for the last 2 years, and met with his writers regularly throughout the fall of 1973 to review early drafts of the show, the scripts on that. But by early September, Jim has even landed an A-list guest, 28-year-old actress and singer Mia Farrow, who willingly agreed to serve as the Muppets' first human co-star. Okay? Things were moving quickly, and yet Tommy Jim was, next page, anyways, juggling several other obligations, making it difficult for him to get his pilot before the cameras as quickly as he wanted. A virtual importance, but Jim has not no way of knowing just how important at the time. With the 2-week stint in London to film the television special Julie on Sesame Street. Wow. With Julie Andrews. Jim has first worked with Andrews in early 1973, surrounded with Ralph in the early weekly series, The Julie Andrews Hour. Wow. Andrews' series was highly acclaimed, but it was a poor time slot. It was up against the Mary Tyler Moore Show. It was doomed to cancellation after only a little more than a year. Wow. Still, some very spontaneous executives of ABC's Albert Andrews already to star in 5 more variety shows over the next 2 years. It's time preparing her to tape him in her native England and starting production over the ATV, Associated Television for short. Anyways, and ITC, Incorporated Television Company, overseen by British producer Mia Margot and Irish professional Luke Gray. Julian on Sesame Street will be Andrew's first special to Grade. Okay? And on October 20th, 3 days after recording a few songs in the Muppet pilot, Jim was off to London to work with Andrews. For 2 weeks, Jim, alongside Oz, Spinny, Nelson, and much over the Sesame Street crew, zipped back and forth between the Combination Hotel and Gray's ATV studios in London, Briarwood district, pulling the entire team into several cabs each day for the 30-minute trip north. Wow. Julie on Sesame Street featured the Muppets in nearly every segment. And there was be only a brief interlude for Andrews to sing a duet with guest Perry Combo. And Jim and his team worked almost consistently, rehearsing their singing and dancing all day, but filming in the evenings. There have been plenty of charming moments, with Kermit singing Being Green, Avengers to all the roles, dancing grouse in the trash cans. Next page. Anyways, though Jim has got an idea for a similar performance featuring multiple Big Birds, Broadway performing and explaining to Andrews producers that somehow it would seem make a rather unique large bird. Not quite so unique. Wow. Between tapings, Jim managed to catch Joe Rassipo at the Dorchester Hotel for lunch. Spent time in the home of Mia Farrow and husband Andres Prevent. For some last minute discussions, the Muppets now visibly pregnant co-star. Wow. When Tiffany Julie Andrews wrapped on November 5th, Jim wasted no time to return to New York in his own project. But his hard work in London has landed him squarely on the radar of producer Lord Lou Gray. Who later admitted that he's been struck with Jim's originality and humor. Quietly the savvy grade, who have been always on the quality for talent. Anyway. But I know it discussed Jim and the Muppets with his ITC producers. Taping on Jim's pilots when that was called The Muppets Valentine Show, began ABC Studios on December 3rd, 1973. Jim spent 3 days taping Farrell's segment, then returned to the studio for a week. A week later, something that way. They completed 2 Muppets-only pieces. Wow. Follow edit took place in early 1974 of January. And just like that, Jim had completed his pilot. They celebrated Jim threw a party at his home in Bedford, where he screened the pilot for his guests. Ben initially took off the 15-day press tour to promote his show in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Cleveland, San Francisco, several other major television markets, including appearance on Tonight Show. As usual, Jim was up against the puppetry pre-adjustment anyway. Constantly reminded reports that Muppets were made more than just children. Were made this special appeal to all ages. Wow, because a lot. Next page. Anyways, of people just think of us a company that does show for children. Because of all the Sesame Street shows, Jim told the Hollywood Reporter patiently, we will maintain a separate image like that. Not all our shows for children, exactly. But with the Jim Muppets Valentine Show, Jim was clearly still feeling his way around for the format. Placing the core of the show on a set like that to look like an overgrown conversation. Wow, okay. Did not realize that. Anyway. Popular, it's like that with an assortment of monsters. Monsters of horrors with the Great Santa Claus Witch. Those are also several new harmonized characters, including George Janitor, the Teddy Wiring Crazy Harry, here called Harry Crazy Donald, for short, a nod to the explosion involving Don Solie. Well, both of whom would eventually make their way on the Muppet Show. For their hosting duties, Jim turned things over to another new character, the volume-human Wally, a sunglasses-wearing hipster who managed the Muppet cast while banging out stage directions on a typewriter. Wow. Then Kermit was there as well, but largely as a supporting character. Well, he did get a good star in his own musical number, but where he paralyzed across the stage on a bicycle. A trick was wow audiences several years later. He was otherwise blending in the crowd. Only 2 weeks after completing the pilots, the Muppets Valentine Stage Show premiered on ABC on January 30th, 1974. Views are already positive, absolutely delightful, but variety. Most seem to acknowledge that the special play with across all age groups. Show press and executive ABC, including network president Martin Starger, like that. We called Jim into the office in March for a conversation about other projects. Well, the weekly series Jim wanted wasn't yet on the table. Jim was still hoping to be given an opportunity to get put into production several more holiday-themed shows in the outline. Jim left the meeting, next page anyways, in Stranger's office without a firm deal in place. But each promised the instructions to keep the instructions going. It was enough for now. Late in the spring, Jim took the family on another car trip. Spent Easter in North Carolina with his Aunt Addie and Uncle Jinx. Wow. With his old cousins Will and Sam and their families. Wow. Ben Henson's oldest sister was nearing 70 now, but remain in good health and spirits. And for Jim, it may have very seemed like those days on Harrisville again. And the families crowded around the dinner table, swapping stories and jokes. It was also a reminder to Jim of just how alone his father must have been at quarries when that, following the death of Betty Henson nearly 2 years earlier. Recently, however, Paul Henson has been spending more and more time with Allie and Betty's youngest sister, Bobby. Wow. Now, nearing 60, who have been living alone following her divorce. Wow. Paul and Bobby's relationship wasn't necessarily romantic, but the two have known each other for nearly 4 years. But with each living alone, it seemed somehow appropriate for two of them have take care of each other. On May 22nd, Jim, Jane, Lisa, and Cheryl look on. Paul and Bobby were married in Quarry. Okay? Well, Jim acquired the marriage was on one of the close race when that. He was pleased in his security and client father would again have the championships like that. He carved and needed his for this part. Jim would continue his habitat, regular visits, and eventually referred to a new couple as Dad and Bob. Wow. Back in New York, Jim was having, by his definition, at least a rarity summer. Audition performers as a new workshop in late May. Discussion tours with Fisher Price executives in June. And in July, overseeing a segment for the national tour and Ice Police and features of the fifth subway of Sesame Street. Next page. Anyways, characters. So there's family in the background. But anyway, Jim was probably, I don't know why I spit that in the background. But Jim was partially excited about the Ice Police project, about being after being approached by Ice Police representatives with the idea. Jim's already written a 29-page script for the show, including lyrics and several songs. He was also encouraged by the mechanics of recreating characters that also been seen in a small hand puppet size and small full size. Figure skating walk-arounds. Okay? Working with designer by Eggerson in the Muppet Workshop, we blew them up and so they were exactly in scale. Jim said proudly. When the segment finally debuted at the Ice Police show in Sacramento that August, the crowd greeted with the characters with thunderous applause. One of those great wars of operations, recounted Jim. It was really neat to see it. I don't know why in the background. But anyway, most days, Jim would drive into the city and check in the Muppet Workshop, okay? Arriving about 10 in the morning. Excuse me, interrupted. Anyway. Moving up the long stairway, quietly called out, "Hi, guys." Okay? As he entered the main room, most mornings, he would briefly gather the designers and billers around him, okay, to discuss eventually puppets and projects before heading up the streets to his office. After about half a block away from that, with Celine's goals could almost always be found tinkering with something, so they had for a while turned the entire workshop into a swirling, clicking mousqueterium with wires and pulleys stretched across the ceiling and down the walls. By Nickerson's boyfriend worked at the salon Curry Hospital. Wow. And he would liberate mice every now and then. I don't know. Save them for the being next experiment on. He said, give him the daughter's advantage of surviving our shop, said Goals. Something like that. Now, Celine has set up an X-ray elevator system by which mice could be dropped on the benches of expanded Muppet builders, where he built an aerial highway made of wires and slinkies. Wow. Allowing mice to collaborate over cardboards, desks, and light fixtures. Okay? It was like a mile freeway, said Goals. Next page. And more than once, Jim entered the workshop and finds Celine's my dad. Anyway, bed on the table. Working intentionally is a mouse perched on the top of his head. Okay? There were spiral matters is to send that summer as well. Over the past several months, okay? I don't know why I had to export. But anyway, Jim has been reading the mattress excuse me, I don't pronounce that word. Sorry, psychological material. Okay, written by Spiritual Jane Roberts, which we'll talk about that another time. But anyway, who claimed to be channeling a male personality that is called itself Seth. Okay, now in her books, through Seth Roberts, explored life after death and the pros and cons in creation, with the underlying message that you create your own reality. That encouraged them. It was a message that must have resonated the man that who Glory spent his days creating completely new personalities at the end of his arm. And on July 30th, he drove to Emerald, New York, to pay his respects to Roberts and her husband. I found this inspired material very beautiful. Jim said the materials, my dad, puts everything into the harmless material that I just love. Jim interest in other ways, with no surprise, to John Stone, anyway. He's almost always interested in getting beyond Stone. I think he saw his mind as a short prison. He was always kind of outside of it, trying things that the rest of us just get going the blinders on. Down our own little path. He was out of the woods somewhere on the rainbow, joking. Anyway, he's out in this woods somewhere. Anyway, he was great. Us too understood. And listened patiently but speculate as Jim informs us about Roberts and stuff. Okay? Now, I didn't believe a word of them, what said Oz. Now, but Jim truly believed in other realms. He willingly believed just him a kind of noble cause. There was a nobility in the Muppets, and Jim bought that. Normally it was gender, okay? But for Jim, saw him better and worth than nearly everyone. His own generosity, in fact, could be staggering. When Barry Bernstein went through a divorce in 1974, he lost nearly everything in the settlement. Jim immediately loaned the next page. Anyways, it aged $100,000. Wow. Told Bernstein there was no need to hurry to repay it. That's Jim Henson, said Bernstein. Wow. He was grand in a strange, quiet way. He loved his outbound. Jim's faith in his fellow man was outbound as well. Now, Jim rarely and ever bought this car. It was everything when it was stolen, he would simply shrug and say, someone must have needed it. And even after his wallet was stolen from the front seat in his Jaguar, yet again, it was a long line of flashy cars. Jim refused to get angry. I agree with that. Instead, he saw another teachable moment. Exactly. Brian Henson remembered his father watching it with his mock sermon at the breakfast table, speaking in inflammable tones of valuable forgiveness. Now, my car was broken and things were stolen, Jim told his family. Speaking of voice, he would always used for his most self-important characters. Okay? But I realized I have a very wonderful life. I have plenty of money. And whoever it was stole, but my wallet needs it more than me. So I find it in my heart and to forgive them. While their father might make fun of himself a little bit at these moments, said Brian. His intention was to teach a lesson. Now, in August 1974, came to the world that Jim had been waiting for. ABC have agreed to a development deal with several programs, including an after-school special, a 9-minute movie of the week, and exclusive use of Muppets on ABC the period of time. Now, while ABC have up for a weekly Muppet series, Jim have definitely resourced the network to give him another shot at it. Clearing the way for second pilot. Jim, in fact, already prepared that one for a show he was calling the Muppet Nonsense Show. I don't know, you're telling me. But anyway, it would be a half-an-hour show with no guest star, Jim wrote. A lot more zany next page, anyways. Comedy with more magazine-type piece and continuing characters that the audience will get to know and love. Now, with the deal in place, Jim was determined to get his second pilot in front of his cameras as soon as possible. Jim immediately put the Muppet designers to work on several new puppets he'd drawn. Hand Bonnie Nickerson pages of the character sketches scribbled in the Disney's performing style. Okay, one new character was a grand piano player that Jim has based on the flamboyant New Orleans musician, the late Dr. John, God rest his soul. Anyways, who had tried not to say free with right back long plays. Dr. John presented a kind of laid-back, hip-talking band leader that had been appearing all the way back in Jim's proposal to Zucas in 1960, okay? Now, in Jim's first drawing for the character, boiled the performer and down to the basics. Now, a wide grin mouth, on the scrap of the beard, sleepy eyes, and the bulbous nose owing up in the wire rim glasses. Nickerson designed the design of the there we go. Character, the new member of the Muppet team, Michael Fred, a brilliant 42-year-old illustrator with a wiggly droll sense of humor. Fred Ferrari, who had been an art director and editor at Random House. Makes sense. Who had been overseeing so much of Dr. Seuss's work, wasn't a puppeteer butler at the time. But he had the knack for taking Jim's enormous drawings and fleshing out their personality, beautiful color sketches that builders could use for further inspiration. Work up Jim's drawing, Frick's sketch of the slightly more polished with that versions of the character, giving him long rubbery arms. Would that make more sense? Well, if you go back to one of my bedtime stories episodes on Dr. Seuss's book, go check out my main channel. But anyway, now, continue on read. And pop belly and top tail, tall for top hat. Wow. Across the top of the page, is called out the partial name, Leon Dr. Elvin John. Yeah. For this remix, Elvin John for you, Don Scott, the piano player. However, given the characters Wide Grim and Glenn Goldtooth, Jim had a different and similar name in mind, Dr. Teeth. Okay, that idea was based on Leon Elvin John, Don Scott Barrow's Dr. Teeth. So that's a pretty good name. Next page. Anyways, now another new character as well could also trace in origins almost as far back as Zeus. Okay, and Jim's outline from the Muppet Nonsense Show. Now, there's a regular skit from featuring Frosted foreign chef who creates new dishes. This was subtitles, that is, in various languages. Now, speaking English, that is, so subtitles, ladies and gentlemen. But in the end, the dish explodes and washed away with its scars, or even eats them. Okay? At USDA show in Harrisburg in the early 1960s, Jim and George Droll had performed Salmon Friends. Yalmar had live hand puppet creation and Messy Chef. Salad, he ranked on the mark German. Wow. Okay. Now, a bit of Jim's love, but having kept out of the Porsche for nearly a decade. Now, he would bring it back but if it was a nonsense show, the chef has a mock language. Will be Swedish. Okay? Jim will immediately name the character Gordon Korsenberg. Better known as this. I don't speak Swedish. Sorry, but it's called Gorn Dag Some Korsbnig. N-I-N-G. Not the other way around. Sorry. But anyway, that's how you spell it in Swedish. But anyway, it's a Swedish word for the translated as railroad crossing. That's how you pronounce it. But anyway, then decided to the name of what finally it was too hard to remember to pronounce. That's how you speak another language. But in the earliest appearance, then Jim will refer to his character as the Swedish meatball. Now that's a fortunate name. Then somebody as the Swedish chef. Okay. Now, despite the ways somebody of the puppet, it was eventually ahead with 2 empty sleeves. Okay, which was a second performer could expert both hands. Okay, the Swedish chef was one of the last Muppets completed before filming on the pilot, but began on December 1974. It was one of the few Muppets since ABC has approved the pilot. Okay, in the time, Jim has been in motion almost constantly, overseeing the writing duties with Marshall Brickman. He is collaborator on the realized Broadway show and Sesame Street writers John Stone and Norman Stiles, as well as visiting in the workshop every day to check on Muppet production. Okay, there was a quick break in September for Jim to celebrate the Muppet team winning the first Emmy for their work on Sesame Street. Okay, major accomplishment to be sure. Though Jim was typing next page. Anyways, low key about it. Jim grinning somewhat, sniffly, some of that. And his tuxedo as he accepted the award along with Oz, Nelson, Spinny, Hunt, and Brill. Now, 3 weeks later, Jim and the Muppets team took nearly a week to travel to London for an appearance on the Herb Albert show. Now, dancing to a Greenwich Bossman Muppets to Bert's Spanish Flea. Now, but the rest of the time, he was in office every day. He was always either upstairs or he could be down, okay, and work with the shop. We call Bonnie Ickerson. Even at the end, Jim came in and worked on the Swedish chef, and I sort of finished for him. Now, Jim's work extended beyond the office and workshop. In preparation for this performance, as a Swedish chef, Joe's even been working this car. President's mock Swedish during his daily drives to Bedford into New York City. Now, Jim has installed a cassette desk in his Jaguar, some of that, on which he could play and record tapes, some of that. Each day, he would listen to a cassette prepared for him by writer Marshall Brickman, who could bring Jim and Oz to tears to especially the mock-friggin' languages, okay? Showing him how to speak mock Swedish. Unfortunately, that would be unfortunate to say it. It's sad, I know. After listening to Brickman's tape, Jim would then record himself, speaking in a full-size microphone. He had been clipped to the dashboard, played back his performance, trying to get it right. I used to ride with him a lot, said Brian Henson. He would drive to work, trying to make a chicken sandwich to mock Swedish, or make a turkey casserole in mock Swedish. It will make most ridiculous thing you have ever seen. People at traffic lights, you just stop and sort of look at him a little crazy. Mid-December, Jim spent 6 days taping the second pilot, which we now chuckily calling the Muppet Show. I'm not going to say the S word, SEX, one that, and Violence. Now, and almost covered the creations of the Kids Stuff pollination, brings 10 puppeteers, including Jane and several designers. Next page, anyways. For the workshop, there were more than 70 Muppets, okay? Unlike the more this already plays some swear Battleton show, snappier, stronger, SEX, and violence by that, balancing itself around a number of running gags, ranging from the homespun response by that to the spinal serial nobly SEX and violence by that. Almost the debut of a number of characters who have been made moving the upper tires on the Muppet Band Farm. Besides Dr. T and the Swedish Chef, Jim introduced the rest of the Electric Mayhem Band. The lanky bassist, Floyd, the laid-back guitarist, Janice, the solid sax playing, Zoot, the wild drummer, Animal, as well as Sam the Eagle, who presents the oldest, establishment values, well, Jim. And, camaraderie Sarah Royal, growing from the oversized chairs in the partial of the Grandfather Club. Take loudly in the background. Part-time Miss Piggy was even there as well. Carry over from the Herb Albert special tape in London early that fall. And he was here supporting member in the movie parody of Return to Beneath the Beyond Planet of the Pigs. They're all characters that the audience will get to know and love, or hate. Or the period of times, well, Jim. While Jim didn't necessarily have the characters to hate, he did have one to yawn. The Margaret Valley animus character named Nigel, who unfortunately Jim had to place in the role of MC. He's a lot like me, said Jim. Okay? Though, apart from the voice, that's really wasn't the case. Nigel was a male of the role character, but lacking any real personality. I felt that was especially involved, but the right place Nigel was played up against Oz and Sam the Eagle and Nelson's Floyd, something like that. Now, Kermit meanwhile had again being graduated to the background cast, appearing only in a dance sequence. Now, according to co-writer John Stone, the decision to bench Kermit has been Jim's part. Jim wanted to get out of next page. He was performing a bit. And said Stone, as Jim requests, we did not use Kermit because he wanted to be established somebody else to be able to do it on a day-to-day basis. Free him to daydreaming and fascinating with that, all that other stuff he did. Regardless, the decision to put Nigel in his helm, it was a mistake. Wow. One that Jim would come to appreciate after it was too late to remedy. Wow. Anyways, Jim completed the first edit of SEX and Violence during the first week of 1975. And sent the rough cut to network executives for review. He waited for the network's response. Jim was skied the comedy environment. Then drove to Washington to estimate the distinguished request. The Smithsonian Institution was preparing to exhibit for the upcoming bicentennial and had asked if Jim wanted to donate the original Ernie and Bert Muppets, okay? Okay. Jim was proud of a wage, and the two Muppets Pro so popular that would originally be a 4-year stay turned to a nearly 15-year residency for the Muppet duo. In the conclusion of the We the People exhibit in 1980, the museum wrote to Jim, begging to keep Ernie and Bert a little while longer, okay? Okay. A long-time fan of the museum, he was even proposed an after-school special called Kermit the Smithsonian, something like that. Jim was happy to gratefully the request. The Muppets would remain on display for another 10 years. Okay, that makes more sense anyway. Jim was scheduled a number of family vacations as small as resort in Austin, Carolina in early February. I was remember that is. But so I was really scrapped his plans, but after receiving an unexpected phone call from director Blake Edwards, who wanted Jim to come over to London for lunch to discuss the preparations and in another television special with Julie Andrews, Edward's Life. Jim flew to London early on. Next page. Anyways, February 8th. Arriving just in time for the promised lunch. He later managed to being awed by the courteous manner in which Edwards and Andrews received him. Dispatched a limo to pick him up in the airport, then bring him to their home for lunch and tea, like that. Andrews also promised to make him up to Jim's canceled showmatch trip by arranging a ski vacation to Henson's at Shaw's, Switzerland. Wow. I was gonna knock out the whole experience, Jim added later. He would make certain to treat his own guests with similar courtesy once he had show of his own. After agreeing to participate in Andrew's upcoming special, June flew back to New York to go with his family to go on a ski trip, but his schedule over the past few weeks has been growing. Wow, he was exhausted, and he drove home and he fell asleep at the wheel of the Jaguar, smashing against the guardrail. Wow, when he was missed his exit ramp at Bedford. Wow. Fortunately, he walked away unhurt. I felt sorry for him. And a few days later, he and his family departed from Gosward. Okay, I don't know what to do. Now, Jim's family returned to Switzerland without him. I don't know. As he toured back through London to spend several days taping Muppet segments with the Julie Andrews special. At wrapping up March 6th, Jim flew back to New York to make his final exit as with sex and violence. I almost said it. I'm not going to say it, but I say it anyway. Working the Julie Andrews special, I put him behind before ABC, behind schedules. Anyway. But he now has less than 2 weeks to complete editing before ABC have aired the show. But he have run into a minor problem. After receiving a rough cut for the pilot in early January, ABC executives have written Jim with a number of suggestions changes. Early on, Jim had run into trouble over the title SEX and violence for this pilot. And numerous network officials surveyed professional viewers, fled to Jim and their findings. In particular, they were concerned about the title of the special, they found had produced stories with negative reactions. But Jim wanted next page. Anyways, large. Anyways, besides the obvious nose pumping and the squeaky clean revelations, Jim thought the title would be plain funny, and that anyone complaining to get the joke. My 14-year-old daughter, Lisa, saw it. And throughout the show, she kept asking, where's the S word? I'm not going to say that in the episode. But anyway, I used it once, but I'm not going to say it again. But anyway, Jim explained what somewhat encouragingly. As for violence, there probably wasn't enough to fill the 30-second spot announcement for Kung Fu. Huh? Okay. Anyways, the special title was a humorous hook. While the show displayed some of the current attitudes towards SEX and violence, when that purpose was to poke fun in them. When it was eventually agreed to make several other changes, the network had suggested removing a brief sequence where he appeared on camera to introduce the show, for instance, and shorten Dr. C's musical number, the title would say. I don't know what to do. But anyway, overall, he was pleased with the final version. Freak says, man. He loved me call it, and it was actually to hear what viewers and reviewers thought. And despitefully, Jim made the rounds with the press about the show in the days leading up to the debut. He was chatting about puppetry and television in a much more thoughtful, relaxed manner than in the past. And other times, he tried almost too hard to make the case of the puppet as art. Puppets are by their very nature spiralic, and so anytime you use them, you're doing something spidelically. He told one reviewer, peninsulates my dad. Anyway, so an audience will go away with their own message. but this is mentally slow, shows with that. Not mentally slow, something like that. Thank you. Anyways, he added quickly, he's a fun show. And still, you continue to stress his credentials as an audience entertainer. As why I work, as always, been on adult and oriented, so they're working a lot with those experts and the Muppets. He explained to the Hollywood Reporter that though this power, we hope to be able to display that puppetry can be solid adult entertainment. Privately, in fact, Jim was already pulling, next page always, his comedic punches. I've been totally down with some of his jokes, the differences for his population as a church entertainer. He has lots of changes what was necessary. I think, in order to achieve that success he had, said Richard Hunt. When the Muppets, there was a sense of primitive humor. He had back out of that. Reviews of sex and violence, I'm going to say it twice, I'm not going to say it anymore, but were even. Though Jim was likely revealed up his body called Zippy, and called good fun for children and adults were on the end. But rather than relying solely on the newspaper, reviews inspiring whoever has to see it. Jim had committed on his own real survey. Pulling homes in New Jersey, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, my home state of Georgia, and West Virginia. Perhaps Jim was hoping for the use of views, comments, and margarine his inauguration of ABC, the ongoing series. If so, he was sorely disappointed. There was a mixed reaction with regard to the material of the survey report. A number of people that feel that some of this is not funny. Why not? Anyway, someone that it was too far out. Where it was, ABC executives decided it was work. There would be no weekly Muppet series. Why not? Again, but anyway, at least not from ABC. Oh man, Jim was probably consolidate. If ABC wasn't interested, he would try something someplace else. Perhaps one thing that would help me in achieving my goals is that I sincerely believe in what I do, but in great pleasure from it. Someone that said, Jim. Even the showbiz Harvard Barry Burston got caught up some of that in that this kind of dodge domination. We thought it would be gonna be great. We knew it was, Bernstein said, and yet one door after another would close its space. The response, said Bernstein, was always the same. We don't do puppets at night. Exactly. The puppets are funny things, said Jim said later. They seem to, with heart of both small and grown-up kids, but the networks have been eager to buy it. Next page. Anyways, still, Jim felt as he was getting close, but it was a matter that he thought of patience and personal. At the moment, there was a noticeable hole in the administrative structure of Henson Associates, following the unaccountable but as well as the departure of Diana Briggenfield in 1974 February. Wow, for over a year now, Jim had been without a full-time producer to assist the development and management of his projects. Although he had been devoted, Bernstein looking out for him in both coasts. Wow. Jim knew he needed a producer inside Henson's Associates who could help him steer his dreams of a weekly Muppet show outside of choppy waters with that into a safe primetime television. He needed someone who knew and understood the media, with savvy business, and ideally serious sense of humor and low-key management style. Who could, as Al Johnson put it, translate Jim's policy and crucially insight about work and the quality as what he wants to produce into the actual practice and help him to run a business. The more he thought about it, the more Jim thought he knew exactly what he needed. As we prepared to travel to Burbank in March 1975 to appear on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, he placed a call to David Lazar, the dynamic IBM executive, whom Jim who was still making short films, okay? And asked to meet him at the Barry Worcester hotel. Jim said the two of them attended the Carson taping together. Now, then they were discussing the bits of over lunch the next day. Now, Jim made his appearance at the Tonight Show in his version of Dress as Terror, wearing a suit jacket over the dark turtleneck and dark trousers. His hair was curling down over his shoulders and his beard slightly shaggy, like a Scooby-Doo difference. Next, anyways, while he still looked vaguely a combo, wanted to be performing Kermit, no one knows Jim anyway. Otherwise, including Carson's, were on the frog. When that's about his role, next page. Anyways, in this SEX and Violence special, Jim commented playing, but he had only one lousy line. Wow, perhaps a wiggling accomplishment, but Jim had made a mistake in sublining Kermit in favor of Nigel. I don't know why. President Market Fence when Carson asked him about his love life. Listen, I work on Sesame Street. You don't ask a frog questions like that. Kermit Frog, do you ask Captain Kangaroo about his... I'm not going to say the S word. Sorry. Life. Well, Bob Keeshan was Captain Kangaroo. I don't know, but I'll talk about Captain Kangaroo in another series, and especially on book reviews of Captain Kangaroo. I'm sorry, but this is too much. Anyway, the one got a big laugh after taping. Jim ups. I felt his pain, that night. I wasn't born yet, to be honest. But I just don't know, to be honest, about his performance. Call it only fair. Johnny, you don't do that to Jim Henson. I'm sorry. You make fun of Jim Henson. You don't do that in the time. But anyway, Jim continued to fret into the evening, growing mean in his hotel. Sweet and appealing that laser the reassurance, my dad. With the 3-hour time difference between the East and West Coast, Jane would be able to watch Jim's tape performance at the Tonight Show in New York, even before Jim could watch in Los Angeles. Jim had the clock at an appropriate time and there down home to discuss his appearance on Carson with Jane. He was very interested in her opinion, said Laser. I like it like that. Despite the wiring differences, Jim still relied on Jim for emotional support from professional perspective from that. When it came to assisting Muppet performers, assistants were almost always dead on. The next afternoon, when Mexican food at Senior Pico, Jim asked Laser if he would ever consider joining Henson Associates. Laser was stunned. Anyways, that was a dream, he said later. I was never having a fork in my hand and it froze. It was such a shock. And I said, oh my God, no, probably. As Laser get in the cab for the airport, Jim learned in the car window, I was very serious, Dave. I want to hear soon. I want you. 3 weeks later, following a trip to Miami, when Jim had to soothe the hurt feelings of Laser's employees at IBM, Jim was Jim's new producer. His impact was felt almost immediately. Yeah, what a shame. Anyways, next page. Anyways, with his impetuously tarred suits, white ties, and loosely curled head of hair, the New York-born Laser looked at as he had step out his consensual call from Cassie called for the role of smooth businessman. A sharp contrast of Jim, who was still wearing his flare bottom slacks, body's colored shirt, and to times a colored scarf under a leather jacket. As master of coordination, sales, and public relations, Laser was determined to bring in the same polish to Henson Associates that he would brought to the IBM product line. As far as the Laser is concerned, the part of Henson Associates wasn't the Muppets. It was Jim. Exactly. Thank you. Now, the Laser was more than just the Muppets. He was a creative force in the part with Walt Disney, whose name polishing on the high customer of entertainment that translated a particular medium, who had to work on Jim's image for his own sake first, said Laser, and then let the world know this man had such character. The Caesar then said Don. Then Don, something like that. Then Don, anyway. Despite the fact that there was Jim's name under the door, something like that. Under the door, something like that. Over the door, something like that. Jim never thought of himself as a face of a corporation. That has to change. Jim was concerned and instead of who he was, said Laser. One of Laser's first missions then was to turn this boss from Murray of Henson's associates performance into Jim Henson. Okay? Oh man, okay. Now he's going to change Jim too much. And Laser had some lessons of his own to learn about Jim's way of doing business, okay? As Laser's first stab meeting, Jim had his new producer, something like that, to make his brief presentation. Laser brought up an executive culture of flip charts and handouts, completely blinded the Muppet designers and performers with endless handouts and list of people, profiles, products, and personalities. People were laughing and sniggering. Wow. Laser remembered that was suit coming through a creative role, but he asked, well, actually, I was the next page. Anyways, I was a Maverick suit. Take a hit. Laser threw a flow charts into the middle of the table and continued taking it, talking to if not as nothing has happened. Afterwards, Jim seriously pulled us aside. If not the same, is it? He said. Oh no, said Laser, it's better. Jim was delighted with the sort of response. His instance about Laser has been correct. He would fit in nicely. Late July 1935, Jim spent 2 weeks in California to tape performances and several variety shows, including 2 appearances on Cher for CBS. Jim's time with Cher will be notable for will be on between takes. Then what would appear this one that on the show itself. Cher, executive producer of CBS, George shot with her in what in fact would play an important role in bringing the Muppet Show to television. Wow. In the argument with Bernstein, Jim intended to approach Salander to discuss the possibility of CBS picking up the regular Muppet series. And now that he was in Los Angeles, Jim, Bernstein, Laser, and Salander had to discuss their options on that. While Salander couldn't necessarily approve the show, he could help actively promote it at CBS. He would need more just Jim's writing pitches or copies of 2 failed ABC pilots to make his case. He needed someone dynamic to take networks then just was shove, not just tell about it. Jim's manualist fully asked him. Jim, who had spent much of his first decade of career promoting other people's products, thought he had a solution. He would make a commercial, not just a regular commercial, but leaving Muppet Show pitch real. Something like that. One can highlight some of the Muppets' strong next page always. Strongest performance spotlight the measuring the Muppets, and then finally do so in a way that conveys Jim's unique and slightly school of humor. Later was excited about the idea and suggested a pitch real mentioned by name in the network executives who would be watching him and making a decision. A trick he had offered incorporated to his presentations at IBM. Now, Scholar, the father of laughing, and the writer of the wicked sense of humor, volunteered to help Jim with the script. Even better, he also offered to make event time available during the Cher taping to allow Jim to tape in just a few segments with Kermit interviewing Cher and her daughters with that. Cassidy, to give executives an idea how the Muppets might interact with human guest stars, and offered both Cher and 6-year-old Cassidy were happy to accommodate. The segment with Cher, some of that, in fact, ended up being probably especially for double entries, many of which were fed with Jim and by Schreier, crossing on the floor beside him, something like that. Well, which resulted in both performers laughing so hard that Jim eventually broke character. Well, now, on August 31st, 1975, a little more than 2 weeks after his initial meeting with Salvador, Jim was in the studios in Burlington, staged in Los Angeles to film the framing sequence of his Muppet Show pitch. But it was a 25-minute pitch that involved Kermit introducing clips, the Muppets' appearances, mainly highlights with the two Muppet pilots, and story shows as well as snippets of Kermit's conversations of Cher and Cassidy. Wow. The most memorable moment in the reel, what we turned out to be a small 2.5 minutes. The new sequence written by Jim and Sawyer featured a smooth-talking Muppet salesman, performed by Jim, who become more and more mad as he makes his pitch in the Muppet Show, eventually building a front actually crucial for Guy Smiley. This is what he said, okay? Friends, United States of America needs a Muppet Show. And you should buy this show, and put it on the air. And we'll all be famous. And we'll be mental, something like that. And hard work with it. But you will care, because we'll make a lot of money. And you'll be happy. Kermit's mom will be happy. Anyway, that makes sense of that. There's a heavily core swell gave Jim's dramatic performance of huge ratings. And God will look down on us and smile on us. You will say, let them all have a 40 share. Makes sense anyway, so there you go. Now, even God, however, wanted to get the last word. And with the CBS logo rising, like a sun in the background, Kurt Warner in the shot and stairs sliding the camera at the last, what the H words, H-E-L-L, what's that all about? And Joe Jim have written about at the last minute, scrawling the line in pencil across the bottom of his script. After reading the pitch reel with the spell of CBS executives, Perry Frabley, when he says mentioned by name in the pitch reel, called Bristain with congratulations. If they don't buy this, Rafferty told the agent they're crazy. And yet remember the wrestler Grimsley said it didn't sell. Well, Senator Party of Jim's Way, at least CBS, was recently extended primetime access role, PTAR for short. A policy amended by the Federal Commission's Commission, FCC for short, to acknowledge more desire and apprenticeship television program. Part of the attachments of the rule, let's say, 1. The major television networks have initially barricaded themselves in the primetime viewing hours, generally from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is all but banished independent local programming during afternoon hours or late nights, where viewers and ratings were scarce. Starting September 1971, however, the PTAR required networks to open up the first hour of primetime and non-network programming, so that independent producers may have the opportunity to develop in their first forward and underway and creative potential under bare combinations that are now available to them. That may have sounded a lot of open doors to Muppets. Now, but Jim's real problem was the 1975 rule change within at PTAR. With real with explanation Sunday night when the retaliation, especially the part where CBS was various place in the Muppet Show, sadly. When the FCC explanation allowed the network to fill the entire Sunday night block with its own programming, CBS opted to move its Friday news program 60 minutes in the first hour instead. Sadly, I know. The move swiftly established 60 minutes in the network's Sunday night flagship, but doing promises the Muppet Show on CBS, at least said Bruce Steen later, the Muppets have lost the best, sadly. Well, disappointed Laser was thought the pitch reel has still done something good for us. It said we have what it takes to do it. It was a wonderful. I'm not gonna say this word because mom is gonna hurt my feelings if I say that. God, beep. Anyway, that's what I say. But Faye agreed, Bernstein. It would continue to show the real anyone who would watch. Now, at the same time, Bernstein was considering the Muppet Show pitch reel. It was also grinding up the opportunity for Jim and the Muppets to become a regular part of the new late night late night sketch comedy series by developing a number of Bernstein's clients. A 40-year-old producer and performer laugh-in writer named Warren Michaels. He described the show and I really love it, said Jim. He also, in August, then Jim began to meet a regular with Michael's writers in preparation, next page always. For the weekly night-to-night series that Jim referred to on the desk calendar, only on as the NBC show. But it was Michaels was calling Saturday Night. And then eventually Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live was a comedy variety show, but it was visualized by Michaels, the scrappy team of writers. But one unlike a variety show we have ever been seen before, we wanted to diversify comedy. There was a Beatles, verified, but being a pop star was, okay? Michael said later. Buried the idea of it. A virtual live show unafraid that taking on politicians, presidents, or pop culture. Terrified that that was every month before it went before the cameras. NBC was so scared of what Lauren was doing there instead of Jim Henson and the Muppets to soften it, said Bernstein. Jim's exploitation, in fact, had been one of the network's non-negative pronounce that word, sorry. Spurs controversy now, there was three initial factors, said Bernstein, who had broken up the deal with NBC. Warren Michaels, Jim Henson, the Muppets, and Albert Brooks, short films. Okay? Now, first part, Michaels was delighted to have Jim's involvement. I've always liked to have been a fan of the Muppets and Jim's work. Michael said, we were starting Saturday night. I knew that I wanted as many different styles of comedy as I could possibly have. I knew some of what ingredients would be. I just assumed that the Muppets under Jim, I don't know, would be able to do one segment a week. We'll take a commercial break. When we come back, we will finish the book review on chapter 8 of the book. Right back at these commercial breaks. Stay tuned. Okay. Welcome back to Book Reviews, episode number 46. I am so sorry, huge delay. I just came back from some recent past difficulties with the pouring down rain and thunderstorms, things like that. Anyway, let's get back to the reading, shall we? See what we got for us. Here we go. Nestled safely in the deep end of late night television, Jim wanted to do something dramatically different with segments as far removed from the look and feel of Sesame Street, which we knew some of that was still with audiences when they heard what the word Muppets meant. Anyway, as it could probably get. For Jim, the characters themselves were always the easy parts. That he knew we wanted monsters to get of some source that scrolling out rough descriptions of 5 characters for the segment. He was entirely thinking of calling Muppets that. Called night creatures. Oh wow. Wow, I did not know at the time. But the universe is which these characters will exist and more problematic. A matter of Jim struggle which both in his Muppet Show pilots. Wow. Now which him clearly established where things were taking its place. Wow. Jim made long list of potential sense of Senator Science Wildcat, a TV game show or sitcom, Friday session, rock room, for finally Sam and Friday described message setup. Eventually, Jim would hammer out the type of puzzle for the segment in which set in, a place called Gorge. Describing the world rather unhelpful, fully from that, as looking either like another planet or Earth, sometimes thousands, next page, anyways, of years in the future. The workshop behind it began some of that hurried constructing new Muppets with characters designed by Michael Furge, who have transferred Muppet Jim's rough descriptions into beautiful, brightly colored drawings. And Jim checked in and over on the progress of that. Most mornings, as he dashed off the UNIMA conference, in Detroit, some of that, or business meetings in LA, he was the hard-working person I ever met in my life, said Dave Goals. At noon on Wednesday, October 8th, Jim and his team entered the soaring building at Furry Professor Plaza, named for Studio AH, for that. When they were participating in the led through for the first show with their entire SNL cast, and the immensely talented and larger unknown set of young performers skilled with improved and hungry for success. On Friday night, the Muppet team attended a party thrown by cast member John Belushi, immensely costly with the show's electric school of writers and performers sizing each other up. After 3 days of rehearsal, one thing was clear, they have their own style. We have ours, said Oz. Insinuating that will only become more and more emerged in the coming weeks. Saturday Night Live, as even Jim was calling it by now, made its debut on October 11, 1975. For that first show, Jim and his Muppets crew have arrived on NBC on 1 p.m. The walk through with the entire cast, including guest host George Cohan, musical guest James Ian and Billy Preston, that lasted until 4 p.m. So like that. Following dinner, there was a dress rehearsal in front of the studio. Audience began at 7:30 p.m. Cameras probably rolling live at 11:30 p.m. Ladies were sticking in this bottle to promote Jim in this morning mirrored act. As arranged for Jim to have in his own private dressing room, placed him in the room AH3, right next to comedian Andy Kaufman, who has appeared on his first episode. Next page. Anyways, the Muppet sketch refers to Random Gorge, was featured during SNL's second half hour. Coming right after the commercial break, we had followed the Weekend Update mock news segments on that. Just Mark's new Muppets included the golf but stupid King Palmas on that. His there's sidekick Straw and a Mystic Stone article called The Mighty Frogs on that. Well, beautifully built and masterfully performed. But it was clear, even from the very first episode, that someone wasn't working. The sketch was too long, but most of the jokes felt flat. And things were only worse as it went on. As time went on, some of that. I was going with a new puppeteer, a stand-up comedian named Henson, performing this very sketch. Was falling off on their rhythms and ruined their timing. But Jim knew immediately the main problem was something over. We have control. The writing. Wow. On the writer's gold rules, only writers hired for SNL could write SNL sketches. It was quickly apparent by the Muppets and SNL writers were a good fit. Wow. Somehow what we were trying to do and what the writers could write and never Geo. Wow, said Jim later. Anyway, we're writing for us. I had a feeling that we're writing normal sitcom stuff. Which is very boring and bland. I felt it was more to deal with the mismatch between the basic comedic DNA of the Muppets and SNL. I think our very explosive, more cartoony comedy doesn't jive their kind of say casual way back comedy, said Oz. So the writers have lots of trouble writing it for us. They weren't used that kind of Muppet writing, okay? Jerry Joe Watts from California understood that Jim was very frustrated. That he had little input in the scripts. The SNL writers, but Joel did have a very handle on Jim's next page, always concept. Jim would come with ideas and sit with them and give them rifle ideas, and they would know how to apply with them. Well, Michael spot part of the problem they lay in the skits on the main concept. It was very, very difficult to promise that Jim had created St. Michael's. We didn't know what his roles would be were yet. The result, no one would to write with the Muppets. Whoever drew the short straw that week, they had to write the Muppet sketch, said writer Alan Sorby, something like that. The frustration of the SNL writers were often parable. During one meeting in Michael's office, head writer Michael Dolange, something like that, angry wrapped the cords and the balance bands around the neck of the Big Bird doll and stalked out of the room. I went right for it, for Felt. He declared blackly, "I don't know," he told me. Compounding the problem that was many of the SNL writers were all the performers in the show. Every minute of airtime devoted to the Muppets, mainly one last minute that could be spent on cast members. We were rapidly developing their own personalities and break up characters. They weren't interested in the Muppets because it would keep them off the air. Well, I do not know, Joel said plainly. Muppets were known, but they weren't agreed odds, so they wanted every moment they could get. Even John Belushi, who was otherwise friendly with the Muppet performers, was snubbed despitefully about giving his airtime to the MUK Muppet Puppets. Wow. Despite the grumbling, Jim had nothing but good things to say about Saturday Night Live. He and Michaels like each other. And every Thursday, and Jim showed up without complaining to Bucking in rehearsals every Thursday and Friday. Then spent most of his Saturdays in difficulty delivery from that, forming someone else's scripts until 1 a.m. in the morning. Lauren Michaels loved them, said Laser. It was not a good feeling going there, knowing you were loved there. There was just next page. Anyways, putting up for you. So it wasn't all bad. The good part, said Oz, that was every Saturday was so very exciting. Me and seeing the beginnings of every A. Kaufman, and the good little films of Al Brooks, and the good John Belushi and Chevy Chase and Danny Aykroyd, live show inside that is always exciting. It could get exciting for reasons, and it went behind performing. Wow. Decided that SNL cast and writers were notable not only for their talent and on screen, but also for their rallies, weekly raps, parties. Proprietary amounts of drugs and alcohol were sometimes consumed. Wow. Plans we could continue on into the working week. Wow. Cocaine was a partially attractive sense to their working on the late night show, and as their user could often go through days without sleep. However, SNL writer Al Franklin usually end up working on the Grit shows, sketches like that. Was a writing part of Tom Davis. Recall that while the few writers and performers had used hard drugs, sadly, for the most part, monetary analysis, was a drug of choice. Indeed, it was a smoking charters, booze charging Muppets, and explained references to drugs, and I'm not going to say that's word in this episode. Anyway, there was a distance with pot influencing the chorus shit. Even though Jim and his team have little or nothing to do with the writing of their seventh. Viewers are nevertheless concerned that Jim and the Muppet performers had to be on drugs. What? I don't know. Well, Jerry Nelson and Richard Hunt were known for sneaking away to pass the joint back and forth. Okay? Mother crew was, for the most part, very strategized. Haas wasn't part of it at all. He felt large gatherings and too noisy. And Jim might enjoy a glass of wine or two from time to time. Maybe, said Nelson, little grass. Very, and guys, anything more plausible than aspirin. He, next page, always, however, tried LSDs with that. Sorry, once, and if asked, will probably profess if it had been something of a disappointment. In the late 60s, if he pursued his dreams of a psychiatric nightclub and preserved himself more and more deeply in the culture, Jim had become fascinated with the idea of mind-altering drugs. Many musicians have spoken with the Youth-68 as publicly meant to drop an acid. As just as openly praised and positive effects it had been on their art creativity. While Jim's art ambition was already expanded enough, he was encouraged by the possibilities of stretching it even further. Okay, never mind. It was determined, then to take an acid trip. But the confessed friends that was some of the reports had been heard about bad trips that he had been scared. That scared him. And was worried about might set himself on fire or jumping out of the window. I don't know. Tell me. Finally, he decided to try the combination of his closest friends. In this case, Oz Lee, Jerry Nelson, and Jerry Joel. Nelson arranged more constantly in the Muppet offices. And whenever Jim sat in his front little desk, his Ames chair of his little sugar cube laced in LSD, said Oz, who left shortly thereafter with Joel, leaving Jim alone with Nelson and them chewing the combination in his cube. I took it as my dad. The Jim reported later. I waited, nothing happened. I was slightly disappointed. He waited, Celine and Nelson good night, drove home, and Jim's experiment with drugs and been a failure. One thing was clear. Jim didn't need criminals to take his mind to the new world. Mine is already there. The world he had created with SNL, however, was showing in the signs of life. Even Brucey admitted that the Gulch idea was not a great thing, criticism of which Jerry Nelson had settled. I always loved Scar, but Nelson, who had fought the characters, next page always, have real potential if given the chance. It was Nelson, in fact, who fought this Scar, saying, I got you, babe. Well, guest host, Willie Tomlin, who dodged the idea, for the show's week-long writing sessions. It turned out to be one of the sweeter moments of the show, and highlight even among SNL's strong first season of skits. Regardless, while Bernstein knew that Lauren didn't want to fire them, it was clearly time to find something else. Okay. As it turns out, they didn't want to work long. More grave throughout this lawyers of ATV and ITC was looking for them. Sometime in 1975, CBS executive Thomas Miller, the boy Muppet fan, scouted the original program that could be shown on CBS owned and operated 6 stations. And so-called O&Os had reached a manual. The New York-based president of Gray's ITC Entertainment professionally begged Meyer to invest in Muppet series. Mando appealed with Ray to Gray, something like that, and Gray, who have already been impressed by Jim's ATV appearances with Julie Andrews, eventually directed Mando to approach Jim to see if he would do a TV series for me in England. Mando and Bernstein traded calls for some time. Bernstein tightly played hard to get, letting Mando chase him all over the country, until eventually they agreed to discuss the matter at Mando's home in Ridgeway, New York. Sitting down The chat with Brucey and Laser, Mano led off by explaining he and Gray always felt Henson would be interested in the right primetime Muppet vehicle. Experienced amazement that no network had added the Muppets to their primetime schedules. Mano knowing that they will be especially looking for a serious and primetime assets period. The first hour of primetime that the FCC had prior away from the networks, the independent local program that met Mando next page. Anyways, engraved want to produce and market the show not for any of the major networks, but independently allowing Gray's ITC production company to market their show to local stations looking to fill in for the 7 and 8 p.m. as period earlier. Anyway, in the case of the Muppets, Mano was already prepared to take a show directly to 5 of the Millers, CBS O&O's, locations of the key market of New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. But this wasn't a network show. Mano stressed, and this was a whole new concept called primetime syndication. Oh, wow. Okay, Burstein didn't blink at all, but he made me flinch. He knew Jim was spectacle of syndication, television equipment of free agency, which provided no new real guarantees. A percentage federal investment. A show called could be picked up by 5 stations, or 50 or 0. Wow. Burstein knew he would have a talk to Jim about it, but he thought Jim would be preserved if Gray and ATV would be agreed to provide Jim with the resources he needed to produce the kind of show Burstein knew he was comfortable to create. At the moment, most weekly shows were budgeted up to $80,000. Wow, per episode. Burstein would make sure ATV would did better than that. It's gonna be wow. But before he could open his mouth, discuss his break, Mel said they needed one more thing. New Muppet pilot to make to CBS's O&O's. Wow. And it makes more sense anyway, but wow. Burstein roared about laughter. I said, I saved you a lot of money. Burstein told Mal, because I have the best 25 minutes of film you have ever seen in your life. And he and Laser got up and leave. Burstein promised to send over the Muppet Show pitch reel for Mando to watch. After which he and Mando will speak again. Now the ATV would have to produce a pilot. Burstein was certain he would nominate a higher rate. Next page. Anyways, the pitch reel was immediately dispatched to Mando. The next day, Mando phoned Burstein with the news. We have the deal. Burstein didn't want to come in until he had the firm number from ATV on the budget. As a back and forthing with Burstein, Mando finally called Lord Gray in London, when the producer agreed to raise the budget for the first season of $3 million. With 24 episodes per season, they gave Jim $125,000 to spend per episode, making it one of the most expensive half-hour series produced for syndication television at the time. The only condition Gray had proposed in the deal was that Jim was to tape his show at Gray's ATV studios in London. Burstein, without even checking the Jim at first, and agreed. The deal was done. Management was excellent. Excitement from that. Burstein immediately called Jim. We finally did. The agent shot the phone. Burstein waited for Jim to inquire about the details. Certainly he was asked how much they were getting per episode. But Jim did, and his response made it crucial. Burstein smiled. Even 20 years later, I love you, Jim, said Jim. Details could excuse me, I misspoke out. The details could be discussed later. And on the morning of Saturday, October 18th, Jim met with Mino to run through the fine print. Details are already spectacular. Less than 24 hours after reaching an agreement with Jim, Mino has sold the Muppet Show to all 5 CBS O&Os, who won the lineups for the 1976-1977 season, starting September. Following the meeting with Mando, Jim headed over to Rockefeller Plaza to join the Muppet team rehearsals for Saturday Night Live. During the break, he pulled Osmond to one side. We're doing 24 half-hour shows, he told Oz slightly. Guaranteed. 4 days later, Jim and Mando stood side by side at the cocktail party and pressed Thomas held at the Push 24 wine club. And on West, next page, we're almost done here, 52nd, where reporters have been told to come prepared for a major announcement. The coming in his arm and flashballs popping, Jim quietly reported the news of the deal with Gray. It was stunned when the room erupted in applause. Mel told the show is a network budget high quality series. Designed as a perfect all-quality all-family vehicle, while Jim assured reporters that he would continue to perform on Sesame Street and make a guest appearance on Shepard shows and squad parties as rise. Jim coming down to him Jim's arms would do anything for the money, said the frog. Wow. At last, Jim said the ability to pursue his dream. Yet it was confirmed that his new organizations, he'll have to leave for London to begin production in May 1976. Met laying down in Lorne Michaels, Bruce Dino was prepared to begin the messy formal process for getting Jim out of this contract with NBC. But Jim wanted to discuss the matter with Michaels personally. Michaels was already wavering increasingly heated calls for SNL's writers to dump the Muppets from the shows lined up altogether. Could afford the gracious and magnanimous releasing Jim from this contract without penalty, but even made clear that Jim had complete ownership of the characters he had created for SNL. All his bigger people said if they wanted to stay, said Michaels partly, the Muppets have importantly do with their own show. You never said it was a way of somebody. Jim always knew the Muppets' stay on SNL was numbered, but was equally magnanimous in his praise of Michaels. I always respect Lorne, he said later, and it was no time did I ever lose my respect for the show. I always liked what they were doing. We parted on all good terms. And almost done here. Around last page. Anyway. And there's 1 minute left. Anyway. Well, mostly years later, Jim took great pressure. Displaying a copy of postcard the Muppets team have sent from London to the cast of Saturday Night Live, pasting a piece of paper under block papers, letters like that, as where the I'm not gonna say it, Fuppets. Anyway. Dear Gabe, the postcard read, we have been wonderful time here in England. We're doing our own show. It's a big hit. Within a year, Jim and the Muppets were the biggest act in England. In less than 2 years, there would be take the United States by storm. And before the decade was over, the Muppet Show would be the most popular show in the world. Wow. Mucking Fuppets indeed. And that makes more sense anyway. So it's chapter 8. Mucking Fuppets. And that was an amazing thing that happened in the Muppets. And that was a successful one. So, next time we meet, we're going to read chapter 9, Muppet Mania, from 1975 to 1977. And this is going to be a 2-hour plus long thing to read. Wow. And that was episode number 46 of Book Reviews. I hope you enjoy it. Hope stay to the next one. Will be chapter 9 of the book, where we're going to read Muppet Mania, the book from 1975 until 1977. Until next time, so just by bit, woman, out. See ya.